In the vast, star-studded expanse of the universe, the Talk species stood renowned for their conquests and strategic prowess. Their technology was advanced, their warriors elite. Yet, there existed tales of planets that defied even the mightiest of conquerors, whispered in the dark recesses of interstellar academies. One such tale that caught the imagination of many young Talk students was that of an Earth-like farming planet, a verdant world that had unexpectedly repelled their forebears. The story begins in a grand lecture hall of the Talk Central Academy, where a group of bright-eyed students gathered around Professor Zorax, a veteran of many battles and now an esteemed historian. The walls of the hall were adorned with holograms of galaxies and pulsating stars, setting the stage for a lesson unlike any other. Today, we delve into a chapter of our history that stands as a testament to the spirit of those we deem primitive. Professor Zorax began, his voice echoing through the chamber. The planet you will study seemed a low-hanging fruit, ripe for the taking. But as our ancestors learned, appearances can be deceiving. The students leaned in, their eyes wide with anticipation. Among them was Clix, a young Talk known for his skeptical nature. "Professor, are humans not just primitive beings? How could they have posed such a challenge?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "Ah, Clix, that is the enigma," replied Zorax with a wise nod. "Humans, though technologically inferior, possess a cunning and resilience that many advanced species lack. Our first encounter with them was supposed to be a routine subjugation. But let me take you back to how it all began." The scene shifted, and the holograms transformed to show a beautiful blue and green planet, much like the Talk home world but less developed. This was Earth's cousin, a peaceful farming world inhabited by humans who knew little of interstellar conflicts. Our fleets descended upon their world with confidence, armed with the might of our superior technology. The initial days were as expected. We met scant resistance and believed victory was within our grasp, Zorax continued, the holograms now illustrating imposing Talk ships hovering over quaint human settlements. But humans, you see, are a breed apart. They do not yield easily, nor do they frighten as we anticipated. Instead, they retreated, regrouped, and studied us, learning from each encounter. It was not their weapons that we underestimated. It was their spirit and their ingenious strategies. As Zorax narrated, the students saw images of humans employing guerrilla tactics, setting traps, and using the terrain to their advantage. The holograms vividly captured the chaos of unexpected skirmishes in dense forests and rugged mountains, where Talk technology struggled against the unpredictability of human ingenuity. The humans used everything at their disposal, Zorax said, admiration creeping into his voice. Their knowledge of their home, their adaptability, and their unyielding spirit. Each setback taught them more about us, and with each learning, they became fiercer, more unpredictable. Clix and the other students were transfixed, their earlier skepticism replaced by a growing respect for the ingenuity of a species they had considered inferior. The holograms faded, and the room returned to its usual academic solemnity. Today, your task is to understand not just the events that unfolded, but the broader implications of underestimating an opponent based on technological prowess alone, Zorax concluded, setting the stage for a deep reflection on strategy, respect, and the art of war. As the students filed out of the hall, their minds were not just on the historical defeat, but on the broader lessons of humility and respect for all beings, regardless of their technological standing. The tale of the Earth-like farming planet was not just a story of defeat. It was a lesson in the complexity of conflict and the power of human resilience. The second lesson began with the students reconvening in the holographic simulation room, eager to dive deeper into the historical conflict on the Earth like farming planet, now known among them as Rickon. Professor Zorax initiated the session with a more focused analysis of a pivotal event, the Siege of Rickon. As we continue our journey into the past, Professor Zorax announced, we turn our attention to the Siege of Rickon, a critical standoff that marked a turning point in the conflict. It was here that our forebears faced not just the strategic genius of the humans, but their unbreakable spirit. The holograms flickered to life, showing a fortified human settlement nestled between two towering mountains. The narrow pass leading into Rickon was the only feasible entry point, making it a natural choke point that the humans exploited brilliantly. The humans, understanding their disadvantage in open battle, fortified this pass, turning it into a death trap for any who dared enter, Zorax explained. The students watched as the holographic talk forces attempted to breach the pass, only to be met with a barrage of improvised explosive devices and coordinated sniper fire from hidden positions. Clix, still somewhat skeptical from the previous lesson, raised his hand. Professor, couldn't our ancestors have simply bombarded the pass from the air? Why engage in such a risky ground assault? A valid question, Clix, Zorax responded, pleased with the critical thinking. Air bombardment was considered, but the humans employed anti-air defenses, which were surprisingly effective. Moreover, the goal was not just conquest but capture. Our leaders wanted the settlements intact to serve as examples of the futility of resistance. The simulation showed the talk commanders regrouping, trying different tactics, fence, night assaults, even psychological warfare, but the humans adapted to each. With every failed attempt, the talk losses mounted, not just in lives but in morale. The humans had something to fight for: their homes, their families, their way of life. They knew the terrain and used it to their full advantage, continued Zorax. The holograms now showed scenes of human fighters moving stealthily through underground tunnels they had dug beneath the battlefield, emerging behind talk lines to sow chaos. This was not just a battle. It was a lesson in the art of defense, Zorax emphasized. The siege of Rickon lasted for weeks, each day costing us resources and soldiers, but costing the humans nothing more than time. As the siege dragged on, the talk forces became demoralized, their initial superiority overshadowed by the stubborn resilience of human defenders. The images shifted to show the eventual withdrawal of talk troops, a retreat that was harrowing and disorderly, under constant harassment from human forces. In the end, the siege was lifted not by force, but by necessity. Our ancestors realized that victory was not worth the attrition they were suffering. Rickon remained unconquered, a small thorn in the side of our empire, but a symbol of immense pride and resilience for humans, concluded Zorax. The students, now deeply engrossed in the narrative, began to understand the complexity of warfare, where victory is not always claimed by the stronger force, but often by the more determined and adaptable one. As the lights in the simulation room brightened, signaling the end of the session, the students left with a newfound respect for strategic patience and the psychological aspects of warfare. Rickon was not just a tale of military engagement. It was a testament to human tenacity and the importance of morale in conflict. In the third session at the Talk Central Academy, Professor Zorax prepared to guide the students through one of the most dramatic turns in the conflict on the Earth. Like farming planet Rickston's unexpected counterstrike by the humans, the classroom was charged with an air of anticipation. as the young Talks were beginning to appreciate the depth of human strategic thinking. As we have seen, Professor Zorax began, adjusting the hologram controls. The siege at Rickon ended with our forebears' withdrawal. However, the humans did not simply celebrate their defense. They planned a response that would shift the dynamics of the entire conflict. The holograms now depicted a map of the region around Rickon, highlighting several key resource nodes and supply lines critical to the Talk forces. Understanding that a direct assault against our superior technology was futile, the humans opted for a strategy of disruption, explained Zorax. The scene in the hologram changed to show human sabotage teams moving stealthily under the cover of darkness. They targeted supply depots, communication arrays, and even patrol ships. Each strike was precise, calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimal risk. The humans knew they couldn't outfight us, but they could outhink and outmaneuver us, said Zorax. Clicks, now fully engaged, leaned forward. How did our ancestors respond to these tactics, Professor? Zorax nodded at the question. Initially, there was confusion and underestimation. Our command believed these attacks to be mere nuisances. But as the strikes grew bolder and more damaging, it became clear that we were dealing with a coordinated resistance, not random acts of desperation. The hologram scenes illustrated the growing frustration among the Talk forces. As their supply lines dwindled and their operational capability was compromised. Despite their technological superiority, the Talks found themselves increasingly on the defensive, reacting to human initiatives rather than dictating the terms of the conflict. Here, we see the genius of human strategy, Zorax continued. They turned their weaknesses into strengths. Lacking our advanced weaponry and ships, they used their knowledge of the terrain and their ability to mobilize quickly and silently. The session then shifted to a critical moment in the conflicted daring raid by a human team on a Talk command center. The holograms showed a small group of humans, equipped with primitive but effective explosives, infiltrating the heavily fortified installation. This raid was a masterpiece of human courage and cunning, said Zorax as the students watched the holographic humans lay charges and escape just before a series of explosions rocked the facility. It resulted in a significant loss of data for our forces, further crippling our strategic capabilities. The impact of the raid was clear in the simulation. Talk commanders scrambled to regain control, and their focus shifted from conquest to damage control. This was the turning point, Zorax declared. From here on, our ancestors were no longer conquerors but survivors, struggling to maintain a foothold on a planet that had seemed so easy to dominate. As the holograms faded and the lights in the classroom brightened, the students were left to ponder the implications of the human counterstrike. The lesson was clear. Underestimating an opponent, regardless of their technological level, could lead to dire consequences. Professor Zorax concluded the session with a discussion on the importance of adaptability and respect for one's adversaries. Remember, true strength in conflict comes not from the might of one's weapons, but from the resilience of one's spirit and the sharpness of one's mind. The fourth session at Talk Central Academy opened with a sense of gravity. Professor Zorax had prepared the students for a deep dive into the strategic shifts that occurred following the human counterstrike. Today's lesson was about resilience, adaptation, and the eventual human dominance. In the conflict, a series of events that had reshaped interstellar military doctrines. Last we spoke, we witnessed the crippling blow delivered by the humans in their daring raid. Began Professor Zorax, his voice resonant in the silent hall. Today, we analyze the aftermath and the eventual turning of the tide in favor of the humans. The holograms lit up, showing the chaotic aftermath within the talk command structures. The raid left our ancestors disoriented. Crucial data was lost, and with it, the tactical advantage. It was a blow from which full recovery was challenging. The scene shifted to depict the talk forces attempting to regroup and reinforce their positions. However, the humans, emboldened by their recent success, did not allow them the respite they desperately needed. Recognizing the vulnerability of our forces, the humans escalated their offensive. Zorax explained as the hologram displayed a series of swift, aggressive maneuvers by human forces. They began reclaiming their territories, pushing our forces back with a blend of guerrilla tactics and psychological warfare. The students watched intently as the holographic humans used the environment to their advantage, launching attacks from the dense forests and rugged terrains that had once been mere backdrops to their peaceful existence. Here, we see the brilliance of human strategy, continued Zorax. Not only did they use their knowledge of the land, but they also used our previous underestimations against us. They knew we viewed them as inferior, and they turned that arrogance into their weapon. One of the students, a young talk named Virix, raised a hand. Professor, how did our commanders respond to this shift? Was there no countermeasure to regain control? Zorax nodded, pleased with the inquiry. Our forces tried to adapt. New strategies were developed, and fresh commanders were deployed. But the humans were always one step ahead. With every attempt to stabilize our position, they launched counter-operations that were unpredictable and highly effective. The holograms showed several failed attempts by the talk forces to establish new bases and supply lines, each thwarted by the humans' relentless pressure. This phase of the war was marked by a significant shift in momentum. What began as a series of defensive maneuvers by humans evolved into a confident, offensive campaign. As the scenes played out, the narrative took the students through various battles and skirmishes, each illustrating the humans' growing dominance in the conflict. The humans, initially perceived as mere survivors clinging to their homeland, had transformed into adept warriors, dictating the pace and direction of the war. The holographic display culminated in a significant battle, where the human forces decisively defeated a major talk battalion, capturing crucial technology and gaining further strategic advantage. This battle was a testament to their adaptability and courage. It marked the beginning of the end for our ancestral forces on that planet. As the session concluded, the lights in the room brightened, and the holograms faded away. The students were left to reflect on the profound lessons of the day, the importance of adaptability, the dangers of underestimation, and the potential for seemingly weaker parties to overturn the odds. Remember, Zorax said as the students prepared to leave, the true measure of a species' strength lies not in their ability to start wars, but in their capacity to adapt, survive, and eventually to thrive. The humans on Rickon taught us that lesson, a lesson that remains relevant to this day. With these thoughts, the students dispersed, their minds filled with new respect for strategic thinking and the complex dynamics of interstellar conflicts. In the fifth session at Talk Central Academy, the atmosphere was tinged with anticipation. Professor Zorax was ready to guide the students through the climactic stages of the conflict on the Earth-like farming planet, Rickon. Today's focus was on the decisive battle that not only determined the outcome of the war, but also highlighted the strategic brilliance and indomitable spirit of the humans. As we gather today, Professor Zorax started, his voice steady and clear. We approached the culmination of our historical journey, the battle that would come to define both the resilience of the humans and the limits of our ancestral strategies. The holograms illuminated the room, displaying the strategic map of Rickon. The main focus was on a large valley that served as the central battlefield. This valley, known to the humans as Freedom's Stand, was the site of the final and most significant confrontation between our forces and the human defenders, explained Zorax. The simulation zoomed in on the preparations of both sides before the battle. The talk forces, though wearied by the continuous human counterstrikes, were determined to make one final push to secure the planet. They amassed what remained of their military might, readying for a battle they believed would crush the human spirit once and for all. On the other side, The humans, aware of the impending massive assault, fortified their positions within the valley. They mobilized every able fighter, prepared traps, and set up defensive perimeters that utilized the natural topography to their advantage. The humans knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, Zorax narrated as the holograms showed the tense moments before the battle. But they were fighting on their home soil, for their families and for their future. That resolve was palpable in every step they took. As the battle commenced, the holographic display showcased a ferocious exchange of firepower. The Talk forces advanced with confidence, relying on their superior technology and firepower. However, the humans executed a series of unexpected maneuvers. Notice the use of the terrain here, pointed out Zorax. The humans had cleverly camouflaged their artillery placements, and their snipers were well hidden in the natural folds of the valley. As the Talks pushed forward, they found themselves caught in a lethal crossfire, significantly slowing their advance. The turning point came when the human forces launched a counterattack from the rear, using a series of previously undisclosed tunnels that led directly into the heart of the Talk positions. This move was a stroke of genius, Zorax admitted. It disrupted our ancestors' command structure and sowed chaos within their ranks. The battle raged on for hours, with neither side willing to give ground. However, the persistence and ingenuity of the human forces gradually turned the tide. The Talks, overwhelmed and unable to regroup, began to falter. The climax of the battle was marked by a daring charge by the human forces. Led by a figure who would later become a legend on Rickon, a young commander whose strategic acumen and bravery inspired his troops to push beyond their limits. The Talks, now broken and disoriented, were forced to retreat, their dreams of conquest shattered on the fields of freedom's stand. The session ended without the usual discussion. The impact of the human victory and the visualization of their strategies were profound enough to leave the students in contemplative silence, each grappling with the realization of just how decisive and cunning an underdog can be when fighting for survival and sovereignty. The final session at Talk Central Academy was markedly different from the previous ones. There was a somber yet respectful atmosphere as Professor Zorax prepared to wrap up the series on the Earth-like farming planet, Rickon. This session was less about battle strategies and more about the broader implications of the conflict, the lessons learned, and the future of interstellar relations. As we conclude our study of the Rickon conflict, Professor Zorax began, his tone reflective. We must understand that the end of a battle does not signify the end of its story. The aftermath and the lessons we draw from it shape the future. The holograms displayed not scenes of battle, but the post-war environment on Rickon. The imagery showed humans rebuilding their communities, tending to their wounded, and mourning their losses. Meanwhile, the Talk forces, beaten and humbled, prepared for their departure from the planet. Following their defeat, our ancestors faced a critical decision: how to deal with the failure and the lessons it taught. Zorax explained. It was a moment of introspection for our species, questioning our approach to conquest and the ethics of our methods. The hologram shifted to show the peace negotiations between the Talks and the humans. These were tense yet hopeful meetings where both sides came to understand the futility of further conflict and the potential benefits of cooperation and mutual respect. The peace treaty signed here was not just a formal end to hostilities, but a commitment to a new way of interacting with other species, said Zorax. For the Talks, it was an acknowledgement of our mistakes and an agreement to value and learn from the cultures we encounter rather than dominate them. The students saw images of subsequent joint ventures, cultural exchanges, collaborative research programs, and trade agreements that benefited both species. The humans, with their resilience and strategic ingenuity, became respected members of the interstellar community, while the Talks learned to temper their ambitions with wisdom and respect for others. This conflict, though marked by loss and suffering, brought about significant growth for both humans and Talks. Zorax continued. It reminded us that true strength lies in diversity and cooperation, not in subjugation and conquest. As the holographic displays dimmed, Professor Zorax took a moment to look at his students, seeing the future leaders of their species. Now armed with the knowledge of the past and its hard-earned lessons, we conclude this course not just with a better understanding of a particular historical event, but with deeper insights into the nature of conflict and peace. Let these lessons guide you as you move forward in your careers. Whether in military, diplomacy, or governance, the session ended with applause, not just for the professor's compelling delivery, but for the profound journey the students had undertaken through this course. They had started with a simplistic view of a historical conflict, but emerged with a complex understanding of the nuances of interstellar relations and the human spirit. As they filed out of the classroom, the students carried with them not just academic knowledge, but a set of principles on how to engage with the universe at large, a fitting conclusion to a course that had started with tales of war, but ended with messages of peace and cooperation.